And so today is Epiphany Sunday. Some of you probably don't know what that is. I probably didn't know what it was for a long time, but this is the day when we remember and celebrate the wise men finally making their way to Bethlehem to seek the Christ child after he was born. And so it's a very holy day in the life of the church, and it's the culmination of them following yonder star as we sing in We Three Kings. And they fell down on their knees in front of Christ when they found him there in Bethlehem. Well, all of this story is fulfillment of what happened and what was told in the Old Testament. And in Isaiah, we find a piece that especially speaks to this truth of who Christ is. It's Isaiah 60. Follow along with me if you would. It'll be up on your screen. Arise, Jerusalem. Let your light shine for all to see. For the glory of the Lord rises to shine on you. Darkness as black as night covers all the nations of the earth. But the glory of the Lord rises and appears over you. Sounds a lot like that star, doesn't it, that we've been talking about. All nations will come to your light. Mighty kings will come to see your radiance. Look and see, for everyone is coming home. Your sons are coming from distant lands. Your little daughters will be carried home. Your eyes will shine, and your heart will thrill with joy. I mean, God gave Isaiah this beautiful image of the temple in Jerusalem and this bright light, almost like the sun itself, shining exclusively on the temple in Jerusalem, the city on a hill, while all the valleys around the city were still covered in darkness. And this light would come. And so what Isaiah was speaking of as God spoke through him, he was speaking of that first Christmas. And we know that Christ was that light that came into the darkness surrounding Jerusalem. This is where, for us, you and me, this is where Christmas gets personal. Because what Isaiah was speaking about applies to us today. He's talking about you and me. I mean, what did he say? Look what he said. He said this, let your light shine for all to see. And here's what he means. He means those that are in spiritual darkness will look at this light shining through God's people, a light that's characterized by lives of integrity and compassion and peace. And they'll be drawn to it. Look what he said. He said that all nations would come to your light. Even mighty kings would be drawn to your radiance. It's absolutely beautiful imagery. And then he said something that I love. He says, sons and daughters will come home. And it reminds me of the prodigal son story in the New Testament where the son finally comes back home. Well, does our world look like that kind of picture that Isaiah painted for us? I don't think it does necessarily. Would you say in verse 5, in your own life, would you say this from verse 5, that your eyes shine with that kind of light and that your heart is thrilled with joy? Would you say that in your own life? Because I guess the question that I'm asking us today is, how are we doing with this light that we're talking about? It's really interesting. I found something that just spoke to me about light. Here's what you may know about the southern hemisphere. At night, there is one particular recognizable feature in the southern hemisphere. It's called the Southern Cross. Have you ever heard of that before? In fact, I think it's four stars that if you draw a line between the four stars, you'll be able to see this cross. I think I got an illustration of that somewhere. You'll see the stars here in the landscape picture here, but if you look at the next one, I drew in the line of the stars, and you can see that. So that there's a cross there. It's an absolute beautiful scene in the sky at night in the southern hemisphere. In fact, I think these four stars with another little smaller star that's in there are on the Australian flag, if I remember correctly. Well, it's interesting that there are astronomers who have looked at this little group of stars, and here's what they've said. they've said that the Southern Cross is actually disappearing because of the increase in the artificial light. Now, it's not because those four stars, the main stars that form the cross, are growing dim or going out. It's because of the artificial light from cities like Sydney, Australia, that they become so bright that it's drowning out. We're not able to see the Southern Cross as bright in the sky as we used to. In fact, it appears fainter and less distinctive in the night sky. There's just too much other light, and it diminishes the stars that form that cross. Well, you know what? It makes me wonder, is the light of Jesus' cross in us visible? Is it still visible? You know, here's the reality. Christ, when he came, he brought light into the darkness. And he has given you and me, all of us, that light. If we believe in Jesus Christ and have committed our life to him, then he gives us that light, his light, to fill us. The early Christians understood what this meant. In fact, Paul wrote about that in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Here's what he says. He says, "For God who said, quote, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ." And I know what Paul had to be speaking about was his own experience on the road to Damascus, because he talks about this bright light that came. In fact, it was noonday. It was a noonday light from heaven that was brighter than the sun. And this light not only covered him physically, but it entered his heart when he met Jesus Christ on the road to Damascus. And that light filled his heart. And it's filled yours and mine as well if we're in Christ. But here's the thing about it. Christ has given us his light so that it will shine through us. That's the next part of it. He didn't just give it to us so we can say, oh, I have this light inside of me. He gave it to us so that it would shine through us. I mean, Jesus talked about that. In fact, he probably was thinking about Isaiah's passage that we read earlier when he said these words in Matthew chapter 5. Look what he says. This is part of the end of the Beatitudes where he had been teaching. And he says this, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." I remember, this is one of my dad's favorite passages. I can remember one day when he was speaking in a church service and he shared this. And I thought, he actually did that. I saw Christ's light shining through him as so many others did. And that's the whole point of it. It's supposed to be shining through us. So if you're a Christian, then here's what it means. It means that Christ's light has been given to you, and it's supposed to be shining through you. It should be shining brightly so that it's lighting the path in front of you, and it's attracting others around you to Jesus. That's why the light was given to us. And it should also do this for us. When we have that light, it should give us joy and strength and encouragement and purpose and meaning and peace. Those things that we talked about and prayed about earlier. But I wonder, here's the question. Is the light of Christ growing dimmer because of all the artificial light in the world around us today? Is that possible? I mean, where once Christians were light in the dark world, now you might argue that it appears that light is fainter and less distinctive in the world. I don't know how you feel about this, but I had a statement that I wanted to see if you agree or disagree with this statement. Look at this statement. Culture now shapes Christianity much more than Christianity shapes culture. Would you agree with that or disagree with that? And I'll tell you, I tend to agree with that. I think that in my lifetime, what I have watched is culture shape Christianity more than Christianity and Christian values have shaped our culture. It's like we've given in to culture and given in some of the tenets of our faith because culture says something else. Have we given in to the pressure to conform to a world that's filled with darkness? Is that possible? I was reading an article about this recently, and there was one line that stood out in the article. Listen to this line. Here's what the writer said. "It's no secret that there is an expanding gulf between traditional Christian teaching and contemporary moral values. In fact, there's a lot of conflict today between what the contemporary moral values say is appropriate and what the Bible says is appropriate. And it's like we've just given up what the Bible says and adapted and adopted what the culture says. And so the question that I'm asking you and me to consider is this: is this light of Christ shining through us, is it dimming in the world right now? Not because the light of Christ in us is going out, because we know that'll never happen, but because the artificial light of the world is greatly increasing, it allows the light of Christ to appear dimmer in us and in the world. The world's influence on ethical and moral standards has dimmed the biblical truth that we all know. And then I ask the question this: I say, well, how has this happened? Who in the world allowed this to happen? Are we Christians? Are we responsible in some way for that truth, that Christ's light is being dimmed by the artificial light in the world? Have we allowed it to happen? So I was thinking about this. So, the beginning of a new year is always a good time to do a self-evaluation, just to kind of ask yourself, hey, where am I right now, and what kind of goals can I set for the coming year? And so I asked the question this way: would you say that the light of Christ in you, I got three options for you. Would you say that it is bright? Would you say that it's so bright? I mean, it's shining, and there's no question. I'm just full of, the love of God right now, and this light of Christ, I just love shining his light to the people around me. Would you say that's you? Is it shining brightly in your life? That's the first option. Here's the second option. Has it dimmed some? I mean, not that you set out for it to dim. I mean, it was probably burning brightly at some point in your life, but all of a sudden you find yourself, for whatever reason, in places where the artificial light around you in this world becomes brighter. And that light of Christ in you begins to dim. But then there's a third option. I hope it's not your option, but is it completely out? Could it be that maybe you've experienced something in your life that put the light of Christ out in your life? Or maybe you've never actually had the light of Christ in you before. And so you would say, in me, the light of Christ is out because I never had the light. I mean, which of those three would you choose for you right now? And then the question is, how could I have that light shine brightly in me right now? What are some things I could do? How could I get there? I want to make sure that it's bright in my life. And here's some ways. What keeps that light burning brightly in me is this. I've got to stay connected to the source of the light. That just is common sense there, which means that I've got to walk daily in the light. I really do. I've got to listen. I've got to talk to the light and with the light. That's Jesus Christ. I've got to obey the light. And then I've got to do this. I need to find a way to serve others and allow that light to flow through me. That's what keeps it brightly, those kind of things. What causes it to dim, you might ask? I'm glad you did. Here it is. It's that we connect to the light source occasionally. It's like, okay, I've got some terrible need right now, so let me run over there and plug in my cord to the light. Or it's that, I just don't have the time for it right now. I'm so busy, and the Lord understands that, and so, you know what? I'll get around to it when I can, when I have time. Here's another reason that the light dims. We would rather fit in with culture. We just rather fit in with culture. We're more attracted to the light around us, the artificial light, than we are the light of Christ. Because it just seems like that artificial light is a whole lot more fun at times. Or we don't let Christ's light shine through us because we're afraid of offending others with the true light of Christ. It's like, I don't want to offend them. I don't want my light to shine too bright with Christ because, it's offensive and we need to be tolerant of others, and I don't want to offend anybody. If that's you, listen, your light, the light of Christ in you is dimming. That's the truth. And the last is this: we're just attracted to the light of the world. We just are. It's like that. It's like we can't resist it for some reason. Well, there's so much artificial light out there, isn't it true? And it looks good on the surface. It's like, that really looks like that's okay for me to do because I'm watching all the rest of the culture. They're doing it, so why not me? But here's what we need to remember. When I talk about artificial light, you know what I'm really talking about? I'm talking about something that can actually be darkness. That light out there that we think looks good can actually be the darkness that Christ came to light. That's why we've got to be really careful about what we entertain, the ideas and thoughts and attitudes that we entertain as we watch the world around us. Jesus spoke to that in a beautiful way that's really, really kind of challenging. In Matthew 6, here's what he says. He says, your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your whole body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. That's good. But when your eye is unhealthy, that is, you're looking at things you shouldn't be looking at, you're seeing things, you're taking in things that you shouldn't be taking in. Your whole body, he says, is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. That is a scary passage. And that's not me. Again, that's Jesus speaking. He's speaking about the light we take into our minds. Because we can take in light that's actually darkness. There's something false or evil masquerading as the light. And we take it in. We think it's something good or true, but it's not. In fact, here's what Paul wrote about that. He says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he says, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of what? Of light. An angel of light. And if Satan can do that, can you imagine how he uses the artificial light in the world around us to dim the light of Christ? Look what else it says. Not only Satan, it says in verse 15, so it's no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. We have to be careful. If we're open to this kind of light, soon we're going to be filled with darkness, and that's a scary place. Here's what we know about the light of Christ, the true light. True light is life, but artificial light, it's death or darkness, and that's what we must avoid. We can't allow that to dim the light of Christ in us. Well, what would happen if the artificial light around us continues on this trajectory we're on to dim the light of Christ? I mean, what would the society look like? I worry about that. I honestly do. I worry about that for my granddaughters. I worry about it for folks I see here in the church that have small kids. I mean, what's it going to be like when they grow up? What's it going to do to families who have the light of Christ in them, but there's so much artificial light around them that it's just dimming it? What's it going to do to young adults and college students if that dimming continues? I mean, will the light of Christ look ultimately like the Southern Cross, where we can hardly see it? I don't know. But this is one thing we can be sure of. Isaiah wrote about it in Isaiah 60, verse 19. This is where history is leading. Watch this. There's going to be a time when we no longer will you need the sun to shine by day, nor the moon to give its light by night, for the Lord your God will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Verse 20, your sun will never set, your moon will not go down, for the Lord will be your everlasting light. Your days of mourning will come to an end. I mean, that's a beautiful passage of what we can expect one day to happen. And so as Isaiah is telling the Israelites in Jerusalem and around Jerusalem, he says, arise, arise, Jerusalem. Let your light shine for all to see. And so here's my question. How will you keep Christ's light shining in you and the world around you in the coming year? What are you going to do? What's your plan? Well, we wanted to give you an opportunity maybe to connect in a way that will help that light to burn even more brightly. And so I've got a list of some ways that you can connect. Look at this list. I want you to pay attention to this for just a minute. These are ways that you can connect in the coming year. And you're going to receive an email today, later today, and text and an email that says, if you're interested in doing some of these things, here's a place where you can check that you'll do these, and we'll see that you're connected. And so there are all kinds of things here to help with the Habitat House. We're so excited about that. It's almost fully funded. Can you believe that? And we're going to build a house for a family that really deserves it. There are ways to get involved in Bible studies, to work with the youth or children, or to be part of our AV tech team. They're just amazing ways for you to connect so that you can be sure that your light is shining. Now, I know this. Some of you watch from other cities, and you may be wondering, well, I can't connect with Park Avenue directly. Well, listen, find some way to do it in your hometown. Find some place to serve, or get a devotional and start doing it with your family or with your spouse, or commit to read the Bible more and learn more about this light that's been placed in you. There's so many ways to do it. But listen, if we don't stay close to the source, our light is going to eventually dim. And that's not who we want to be. In fact, my desire for Park Avenue for 2021, now that 2020 is behind us, I want us to be like Jerusalem, that city on the hill. I want the light to shine so brightly upon us and through us that nations, to borrow that language, and kings will be drawn to it. Not for our glory, but for the glory of God. Because you and I know the value of having that connection with the source of light. And there's so many people who still need that even now. So what are you going to do to keep your light burning brightly in 2021? Well, here's some next steps for you. The first one might be that you, this year, will work to keep Christ's light bright in you by you fill in the blank. You decide. It could be any number of ways. But listen, please, choose a way now. Plan for it now. Set that goal and keep that goal. The second was, I will respond to today's email. Choose one of the ones that we're offering for you today through Park Avenue. The third was this, and maybe we all need to do this. I will ask Jesus to forgive me for chasing artificial light and allowing his light in me to grow dim, because we want that light to shine brightly. That's why he gave it to us. You know, Jesus was that light and has been for us in our lives right now. But that light is the same light that would shine on a cross for all to see.